With new cards and evolutions getting added every single month, new Clash Royale strategies are constantly being formed. And with all that chaos going on, it's more important than ever to know the do's and don'ts so that you don't make dumb mistakes. So here are 15 Clash Royale things you're doing wrong. When you see a hog rider coming towards your tower from the bridge, for most of us, our muscle memory kicks in and we just place our building in the middle to kite the hog as much as possible and buy time for our towers to take it out. Well, when you're using the goblin cage, this is actually the opposite of what you want to do. Placing the goblin cage in the middle will result in the hog rider outrunning the goblin brawler inside and getting a hit on your tower. To fully counter the hog, instead place the goblin cage directly in his path so that when it breaks, the brawler can get a couple hits in and save your tower from taking any damage. When using the miner for chip damage, most people think you can just place him wherever you like since he pretty much gets the same amount of hits in no matter what. While this does seem true at first, most placements of the miner can make it easy for your opponent to pull him to the king tower with their tornado for a free activation. So instead of placing him in the front or back of the tower, you want to place your miner at the far corner of the tower furthest from the opponent's king. This puts their crown tower in the way, stopping the tornado from being able to pull the miner far enough and leaving your opponent's king tower disabled just like you wanted. One mistake I see players make all the time is mistiming their counter to an incoming flying machine. I've personally made this mistake more than once, and it's easy to do since your depth perception doesn't work as well with flying cards. Well, luckily there is a simple trick that will fix your timing and ensure that you never take tower damage to the flying machine again. Instead of looking at the flying machine itself, you'll want to pay attention to its shadow, which will tell you exactly which tile the machine is technically on. Then when that shadow crosses the bridge, you'll know it's the perfect time to place your tank or other counter so that your tower is in range to help take it out. Some players think using the Inferno Tower to defend against an Electro Giant wouldn't be a good idea since he just resets it with his electric aura. While this is true, there's actually a specific placement that makes the Electro Giant's path a bit longer, buying your Inferno Tower just enough time to heat up and take the E-Giant out without getting reset or damaged. So next time your opponent sends in an E-Giant, make sure to use the proper placement and give yourself a nice positive elixir trade. Another crucial placement tip is to place your spear goblins in what is called the bypass placement rather than right at the bridge when you're trying to get chip damage. This placement will actually buy the second spear goblin just enough time to get a second hit in, which at max level means an extra 119 chip damage to your opponent's crown tower. The only downside to this placement is that it does give your opponent just a bit more time to react to your goblins, so if you're playing against someone with lightning fast reflexes, maybe stick to the normal placement for that match. Another thing I see players ignore far too often is the fact that the spirit cards in Clash Royale have a health bar. I don't mean that they literally forgot the feature exists, but far too many players just place their spirits anywhere out of harm's way so they can jump onto their target and achieve the desired outcome. But you might be surprised to learn that any of the spirit cards can actually tank a hit from a bunch of different units before dying, even from something as strong as a musketeer. Running with that example, placing your spirit in such a way where it tanks a hit before jumping can save your tower or other troops from some decent damage and potentially win you a game in some scenarios, so remember this tip next time you're using one of the spirit cards. Some cards in Clash Royale were just built to be used together. Think of the Executioner and the Tornado, the Lumberjack and the Balloon, and so many more combos. But one combination I'm sure a lot of you haven't thought of is the Berserker and the Rune Giant. For those who don't know, the Rune Giant's enchantment grants the target troop a flat damage boost on every third hit. Because of this, it makes a lot more sense to use the Rune Giant with fast attacking troops like the Dark Goblin and Lumberjack since they attack more often and will therefore get a much better damage boost overall. This effect is perhaps the strongest with the Berserker since she attacks very fast, and we can tell these two were meant to be used together since they came out around the same time and they even have the same orange hair. So next time you're thinking about using the Rune Giant in a deck, make sure and put the Berserker in too for the best value. Another thing a lot of players struggle with is being patient when placing their rage spells. I'm sure all of us have had the misfortune of playing a match against an Elite Barb rage player, and more often than not, you'll see them drop their rage spell before even dropping the Elite Barbs at the bridge. This seems fine enough since they'll run into the rage eventually, but waiting 1 to 2 seconds after placing the Elite Barbs can not only buy your troops more time in the rage spell, but it also makes sure you don't miss out on taking out any potential counters like the Skeleton Army, Bats, or others. In this example, you can see how waiting to play the rage spell made an incredible difference in the outcome of the push. This technique can also be applied to most other spells in the game, as waiting a bit longer can almost always give you the opportunity to get extra value with your spell. The next mistake on our list is leaking elixir. For whatever reason, Clash Royale players are very stubborn about not wanting to be the player to make the first move in a match. This does make sense since if you aren't the first person to play a card, you get a second to react to what your opponent played and feel out their deck a bit more. That being said, I've seen people sit around and leak 2, 3, or even more elixir because they're planning their first move so long. This instantly puts you in a sizable elixir deficit, which can at best make the match a lot harder to win, but at worst it can result in you straight up losing the match entirely due to being behind on elixir. So if you really have to not be the first person to make a move, at least be ready to react very quickly to your opponent's first card so that you don't leak too much elixir and give them an easy win. Another tip that can make matches a lot easier to win in many scenarios is to use split lane pushes. This strategy is practically the whole reasoning behind Royal Hog's recruits decks, but it can be applied across many other deck archetypes as well if you really think about it. A split lane push is when you apply some form of pressure across both lanes instead of just building a massive push in one lane. While some players will have no trouble defending these types of pushes, a lot of times sending something small and quick in the opposite lane when your push is at the bridge can either cause your opponent to lose focus or just slip by entirely unnoticed and get you some really solid damage. So instead of always sticking to one lane, try to split cards in the back from time to time, or just split up your push altogether when it makes sense. The next mistake I see players making is only playing meta decks all the time and never being willing to switch things up. I have shared a similar tip to this in the past, but I'm talking from a completely different angle this time. What I'm getting at is that a fun and effective strategy can be to take an existing popular deck like say Logbait and switch out one of the less iconic cards in the deck for something completely different. This works because most players are used to classic decks and won't notice you haven't played the 8th card, which can sometimes give you the element of surprise and maybe even win you the match. The most popular example of this recently has been the sneaky golem trend, where players play a 2.6 hog deck but switch out the ice golem for an actual golem. The key to success with this strategy is to wait to play the switched out card until a pivotal moment in the match when your opponent has either overcommitted with a push or just isn't expecting it. This can be a super fun way to switch things up and confuse your opponents. Another mistake that a lot of players make is either ignoring or straight up not being aware of the card weight system in the game. For those who don't know, every card in Clash Royale has a weight. For example, the P.E.K.K.A. and Golem are very heavy cards that are hard to push or pull out of the way, whereas the Bomber is extremely light and can easily be tossed around by other troops and spells. This can be very useful to know when trying to defend an incoming push, but just remember that the log will push any card back no matter how heavy. When you have a bandit coming towards your tower, players usually do one of two things. Either they place their counter directly on top of the bandit, which can be fine depending on the counter, or they place it in the middle to try to get both towers involved in taking the bandit out. But in a lot of scenarios, it can be beneficial to place your counter in range of the bandit at just the right time so that she won't dash onto your counter or dash onto the tower after taking out your counter. Like I said, this doesn't apply to counters like the mini P.E.K.K.A. that'll just take her out either way, but with something like the skeletons, this can make a huge difference. We all remember how overpowered and ridiculous the evolved Lumberjack was upon release, with players spamming rage spells to keep him alive forever in addition to him being invincible. While Supercell fixed this by causing the rage spell to no longer extend the Lumberjack Ghost's life, the rage spell will still keep the Lumberjack Ghost alive for the full 4 seconds if he were to leave the original rage spell. So if your Lumberjack Ghost ever tries to immediately leave the original rage spell, which it seems he does quite often, you can still drop another rage spell to make sure he gets his full 4-second lifespan and you get all the value out of his high damage output. The next mistake I see all the time is players spending all of their resources on one deck. While this can be effective in the short term by becoming over-leveled and being able to win a lot of matches, once you get higher in trophies and other players have maxed cards too, you're now kind of stuck with that one deck and have no option to switch or make a new deck without being under-leveled yourself. So what I would recommend is that you upgrade all your cards to a decent level, say level 12 or 13, before going crazy on your main deck. This will give you options and prevent you from becoming hard stuck at a certain trophy range. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss another weekly upload. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.